It was 3:11 a.m. on Sunday, February 14th, 1965, when Bumpy Johnson was woken by the sound of a phone ringing in the dark bedroom of his apartment on 124th Street in Harlem. The ring cut through the silence like a blade, shrill and insistent, echoing in a room that still smelled faintly of cigar smoke and expensive French cologne. Outside, Harlem slept under a thin layer of dirty snow, streetlights casting yellow halos on cracked sidewalks and overflowing trash cans. Inside, the only light came from the glowing red digits of the alarm clock on the nightstand. 3:11. Bumpy opened his eyes, fully awake before the second ring. Years of prison, years of war with Italians, years of knowing that most late-night phone calls meant blood, had trained his body to snap from sleep to readiness in a single breath. The third ring came. Beside him, Mamie stirred, rolling onto her side, her hand brushing his arm. "Ellsworth," she murmured, still half asleep. "It's the middle of the night." The fourth ring came. Bumpy reached for the phone, his thick fingers surprisingly gentle as he lifted the receiver and pressed it to his ear. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough but controlled. "Who is this?" There was a rush of noise on the other end, shouting, glass breaking, a woman screaming in the background. Muffled by distance, but sharp enough to slice through the line. Then a man's voice, breathless, panicked, shouting over chaos. "Mr. Johnson, it's Reggie. Reggie from Queens," the voice said. "They hit Malcolm's house. They just firebombed his house in East Elmhurst. His kids were inside. His wife was inside. The whole place is on fire." Bumpy sat up in bed so fast the mattress groaned beneath his weight. "What?" he said, suddenly wide awake, every muscle in his body going rigid. "Say that again." "They firebombed his house," Reggie repeated, his voice cracking. "3 Molotov cocktails through the windows. I was across the street. I saw the car. I saw the men. They threw the bottles and drove off. The whole front room is burning. Brother Malcolm got his family out, but..." In the background, another explosion, louder this time, like a window shattering under intense heat. Children crying. A woman coughing. Mamie was fully awake now, sitting up, watching Bumpy's face. "Is he alive?" Bumpy demanded. "Is Malcolm alive?" "Yes," Reggie said. "He's outside with Sister Betty and the girls. They're all out, but everything's burning. The police are here now. Fire trucks, too. It's bad, Mr. Johnson. Real bad." Bumpy swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up, reaching for the robe hanging on the nearby chair. "Keep your eyes open," he said. "Don't say my name to nobody. I'll call you back." He hung up the phone without waiting for a reply. For a few seconds, the room was silent, except for the soft ticking of the clock and the faint sounds of Harlem outside. Distant sirens, a car passing, a dog barking at shadows. "What happened?" Mamie asked quietly, already knowing from the tension in his shoulders that it wasn't business as usual. "Somebody just tried to kill Malcolm," Bumpy said, tying the belt of his robe. "Firebombed his house with his babies inside." Mamie's eyes widened. "Is he—" "He's alive," Bumpy said. "For now." He walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside, looking out at the empty street, the thin strip of snow glistening under streetlights. Somewhere across the river, smoke was rising from a modest brick house in Queens, where a man he considered both nephew and mirror image had just watched his children almost burn alive. Bumpy let the curtain fall. "This is it," he said quietly. "They're done talking. They're making their move." "Who?" Mamie asked. "The nation?" Bumpy didn't answer immediately. The Nation of Islam, the FBI, the NYPD, the enemies outside, the enemies inside. Names didn't matter as much as patterns, and the pattern was clear. When people started throwing fire, the next step was bullets. "You going to him?" Mamie asked. Bumpy turned from the window and looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "I'm going to him, tonight." She studied him for a moment. "You know, if you go now, if you stand next to him when the cameras show up, they're going to link you and Malcolm together in every newspaper, every FBI file, every police report," she said. "He's already on every list that matters. You want to put your name next to his on those lists?" Bumpy smiled slightly. No humor in it, just a flash of teeth. "Mamie," he said, "my name has been on every goddamn list in this city since before Malcolm knew what a list was." He picked up the phone again. "Who you calling?" Mamie asked. "The only man who can have my car ready in 3 minutes at 3 in the morning," Bumpy said. He dialed. After 2 rings, a sleepy voice answered. "Yeah?" the voice said. "Who this?" "Bub," Bumpy said. "Get dressed. We're going to Queens. Malcolm's house just got burned." There was no hesitation. "I'll have the car out front in 5, William Bub Hewlett said. "You want anybody else?" 2 more, Bumpy said. "Bring Earl and Frankie, and bring the long coats." Long coats meant guns. It always had. Bumpy hung up and looked back at Mamie. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. He walked back to the bed, leaned down, and kissed her forehead. "The world changed the day Malcolm walked out of the nation," Bumpy said. "The only question now is who survives the change." He straightened up. "And I don't plan on letting some bow-tied choir boys with 45s decide that for him." He left the bedroom, the floor creaking under his weight, already moving like a man who had made a decision long before the phone ever rang. 45 minutes later, a black Cadillac Fleetwood glided to a stop at the corner of 97th Street and 23rd Avenue in East Elmhurst, Queens. The neighborhood was quiet, middle-class respectability. Small brick homes, trimmed hedges, modest cars parked neatly along the curb. This was not Harlem with its jazz and jitneys and late-night dice games. This was the outer borough dream. Men who took the subway to work, women who shopped at the A&P, kids who rode bikes in the street until the streetlights came on. Tonight, though, the street looked like a war zone. 2 fire trucks blocked most of the road. Police cars with spinning red lights cast an eerie glow on a crowd of stunned neighbors in bathrobes and coats thrown over pajamas. Smoke drifted up from a badly burned brick house where firefighters were coiling hoses and knocking down embers. "Jesus," Earl muttered from the front passenger seat as he watched through the windshield. They really tried to cook him. "Stay cool," Bub said from the driver's seat. "We ain't here for the show." In the back seat, Bumpy watched the scene with the detached focus of a man who had seen what people do when they want someone dead and believes nothing surprises him anymore. He was wrong. What surprised him now was not the fire damage, blackened window frames, shattered glass, charred curtains flapping in the cold breeze, but the sight of Malcolm standing in the middle of the street, coat half-buttoned, tie crooked, holding his youngest daughter in his arms, while his wife, Betty, clutched the other children close. Malcolm looked like a man who had not slept in weeks. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle twitched in his cheek. He spoke to a reporter with barely contained fury, gesturing at the burned house behind him. This is what we're dealing with, Malcolm was saying. Cowards who throw bombs in the night while children sleep. They tried to burn my babies alive. The reporter leaned forward, microphone almost brushing Malcolm's face, hungry for anger, for words that would make headlines. "Do you believe the Nation of Islam is behind this attack?" the reporter asked. Malcolm paused. He knew exactly what the reporter wanted him to say. He also knew exactly what would happen if he said it into a microphone at 3 in the morning in front of cameras that would replay his words on evening news across America. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they burned with something colder than rage. "I believe," Malcolm said slowly, "that when a man tries to tell the truth in a country built on lies, there are always those who will try to silence him." He turned away from the microphone, ending the interview. The reporter frowned, disappointed. Bumpy smiled slightly in the darkness of the Cadillac. "He's getting smarter," Bumpy said. "Old Malcolm would have named names and given them all the war they wanted before sunrise." "He still might," Bub said, "once the cameras leave." "Maybe," Bumpy said quietly. "But that man right there, that's not Detroit Red from Roxbury anymore. That's something else." He opened the car door. "Wait here," he told Bub. "If the cops recognize me, I don't want them seeing all of you with me." "Like they don't know already," Earl muttered. Bumpy stepped out into the cold air, his breath frosting in front of him. He wore a dark overcoat over a black suit, a white shirt, and a muted tie. No hat tonight. He wanted the wind on his scalp, wanted to feel the sting of cold, as a reminder that he was awake, alive, walking into something that had no good ending. As he approached, a uniformed police sergeant stepped in his path. "Streets closed," the sergeant said. "Residents only. You live around here, sir?" Bumpy smiled politely, the way a man smiles at a child who doesn't realize he's trying to stand in front of a train. "I'm visiting a friend," Bumpy said. "Yeah?" the sergeant said. "Who?" "Malcolm," Bumpy said. "You might have heard of him." The sergeant's expression changed in an instant. "You a member of his organization?" he asked. There was something in his tone. Suspicion, hostility, curiosity. Men like Malcolm drew all three. "No," Bumpy said. "I'm family." The word hung between them. Before the sergeant could respond, Malcolm's voice carried across the cold air. "Let him through," Malcolm said. The sergeant turned. Malcolm was watching them from 20 feet away, children still clustered around Betty behind him, smoke still rising from the wreckage of the life he had tried to build in this quiet Queens street. The sergeant hesitated. "Mr. Little, this man," he began. "This man," Malcolm said, "was looking out for me before the city of New York ever heard my name. Let him through, officer." The sergeant stepped aside. Bumpy walked the remaining distance, his shoes crunching on a thin layer of ice. When he reached Malcolm, they stood facing each other for a long moment without speaking. To a stranger, the two men could not have been more different. Bumpy was older, heavier, his face a map of past battles. Scars, lines, a faint indentation at his temple where a bullet had grazed him in 1942. His eyes were hooded, his expression almost bored, like nothing could surprise him enough to make him show it. Malcolm was lean, tightly coiled, every nerve visible under his skin. Even now, in the aftermath of attempted murder, he radiated controlled intensity. His glasses were slightly askew, one lens reflecting the blue flash of a police light. "How's the baby?" Bumpy asked. Malcolm's eyes flicked down to the small girl in his arms, her face pressed into his chest, her tiny hands gripping his lapel. "She was asleep when the first bomb hit," Malcolm said quietly. "If Betty hadn't smelled the gasoline—" His voice trailed off. "They're alive," Bumpy said. "That's what matters tonight." Malcolm looked up, meeting Bumpy's gaze. "Tonight?" Malcolm repeated. "What about next Sunday, and the Sunday after that?" He shifted the child in his arms, adjusting her weight. "I told you this would happen," Bumpy said. "Sooner or later." Malcolm's jaw clenched. "I remember what you told me," he said. "I remember every word." A siren wailed in the distance, another fire truck, another patrol car, another reminder that the city never truly slept. It just changed shifts. "Let's walk," Bumpy said. "You look like you've had enough of microphones for one night." Malcolm handed the baby to Betty with a murmured reassurance and gestured for Bumpy to follow him a few steps away from the crowd to a spot near a leafless tree where the shadows swallowed them more completely. From there, they could still see everything: the destroyed house, the police, the neighbors, the reporters. But much of what they said would be lost in the crackle of radios and the murmur of voices. "You know what the cops asked me first?" Malcolm said quietly. "Before they asked if my family was all right, before they asked if I was hurt?" Bumpy didn't answer. "They asked," Malcolm continued, "Do you have enemies, Mr. Little?" He laughed once, a short, bitter sound. "Do I have enemies?" Malcolm repeated, as if that isn't the simplest question in the world to answer. "You could have told them," Bumpy said. "Names, places, telephone numbers." "I could have," Malcolm agreed. "And by noon tomorrow, every paper in America would run the headline, 'Malcolm X declares war on Elijah Muhammad.'" He shook his head. "I'm not giving them that headline," he said. "Not written in my children's blood." For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of cooling wood as the last embers of the fire died inside the house. "You still won't take protection," Bumpy said. It was not quite a question, not quite a statement. Something in between. Malcolm looked at him. "I don't want your men around my house," Malcolm said. "I don't want your cars outside my meetings. I don't want your name whispered in the same breath as mine, any more than it already is." "The people trying to kill you," Bumpy said, "don't care what you want." "They care about appearances more than you think," Malcolm replied. "They need to look righteous while planning murder. They need to be able to say, 'We didn't kill Malcolm. Look, there's no proof.'" "You think proof matters?" Bumpy asked. "Proof is for men who believe in courts. These men only believe in bullets and God, usually in that order." Malcolm's eyes flashed. "You don't think I know that?" he demanded, his voice low but fierce. "You think I don't understand what I walked away from? I spent 12 years defending a man who was sleeping with teenage girls under the name of religion. You think I don't know what his followers are capable of when they feel betrayed?" His breath steamed in the cold air. Bumpy let the anger wash over him like rain. He had learned long ago that trying to stop Malcolm mid-rage was like trying to stop a train by stepping onto the tracks. When Malcolm's shoulders finally dropped a fraction of an inch, Bumpy spoke again. "You know what I see when I look at that house?" he asked, nodding toward the burned building. "What?" Malcolm asked, still breathing heavily. "I see a man who thinks words will protect his family," Bumpy said. "When the people coming for him only understand two things: fear and force. Malcolm's lips tightened. "Fear and force are your gods," he said. "They are not mine." Bumpy smiled slightly. "Don't lie to yourself, Malcolm," he said. "You know how to use fear. You know how to use force. You just don't like admitting it." Malcolm looked at him. "You think I don't know what people say about me in Harlem?" Malcolm asked. "That I'm just the bow-tied version of you? That I traded zoot suits for suits and ties, pimping for preaching, hustling for holy war?" He shook his head. "Maybe that was true once," he said, "but not anymore." Bumpy tilted his head, studying him. "So who are you now?" Bumpy asked. "If you're not Detroit Red and you're not the nation's minister?" For the first time that night, something like uncertainty flickered across Malcolm's face. "That's what I'm trying to find out," he said quietly. "That's what terrifies them the most. Not who I was, but who I might become." Another police car arrived, tires crunching on ice, lights spinning. The crowd shifted to make room. Bumpy stepped a little closer. "Let me be very clear with you," he said. "The men who threw those firebombs tonight, that was practice. That was a warning. The next time, they won't use bottles. They'll use guns. And they won't come at 3 in the morning. They'll come when the cameras are rolling and the microphones are on, so they can kill your body and your message in the same burst of gunfire." Malcolm said nothing, but his eyes did not leave Bumpy's. "I'm not asking you this as a gangster," Bumpy said. "I'm asking you as the man who watched you shine shoes on Lenox Avenue 15 years ago. Let me put men on you. Let me put cars on you. Let me make it expensive for anyone to take a shot at you." Malcolm's voice was very soft when he answered. "And what about the people who will say, 'Look, Malcolm X has gangsters guarding him now'?" he asked. "What about the Muslims in the mosque who will say, 'See, we told you he wasn't righteous. Look who he stands with now'?" "You worried about their opinion more than your life?" Bumpy asked. "I am worried," Malcolm said slowly, "about the integrity of the message. If I die because I refuse to walk with men like you, people can say, 'He died for something pure.' If I live because I walked with you, people can say, 'He compromised.' And compromise is the one thing I have refused from the moment I left Elijah." Bumpy stared at him for a long moment. "Let me tell you something about dying for something pure," Bumpy said quietly. "It's still dying." The wind picked up, carrying a faint smell of wet ash and gasoline. "If you die," Bumpy continued, "the men who did it will tell themselves they killed a traitor. The government will say they lost a troublemaker. The newspapers will say they lost a controversial figure. You know who will know the truth." "Who?" Malcolm asked. "The little girl who almost burned tonight," Bumpy said. "She'll know she lost her father, that's all. She won't care if you died pure or messy. She'll just know you're gone." Malcolm's hand tightened around the edge of his coat. "You think I don't know that?" Malcolm asked. "You think I don't see my daughters' faces every time I walk onto a stage?" "Then act like it," Bumpy said. They stood in silence for a few seconds, the world around them reduced to the sound of distant engines and the murmur of a city watching a man decide whether he wanted to live like a hypocrite or die like a martyr. Finally, Malcolm spoke. "Come see me tomorrow," he said, "in Harlem. We'll talk there, away from cameras, away from cops. Tonight, my family needs me more than you do." Bumpy nodded. "Where?" he asked. "The Audubon Ballroom," Malcolm said. "I'm speaking there next Sunday. You know the place." I know it, Bumpy said. Everybody knows it. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon, Malcolm said. We'll talk then. He turned to walk back to his family, then paused and looked over his shoulder. And Bumpy, he added, don't bring your soldiers with you. I want to talk to you, not your reputation. Bumpy gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Tomorrow, he said. He watched Malcolm rejoin Betty and the children, watched him take his oldest daughter's hand, watched the family stand in front of the burned house like survivors of a bombing raid in some distant war. Then he turned and walked back to the Cadillac. As he slid into the back seat, Bub looked at him in the rearview mirror. So? Bub asked. He going to let us put some men on him? Bumpy leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes for a moment. Tomorrow, Bumpy said. We'll find out tomorrow. It was a humid evening in the summer of 1968 when Bumpy Johnson found himself standing on a Harlem rooftop, looking down at a neighborhood that felt both exactly the same and completely different. Kids still chased each other through streams of hydrant water. Radios still blared soul music from open windows. Men still leaned on corners, making side deals under the streetlights. But the faces were younger now. The old numbers runners and policy kings were giving way to a new breed. Heroin dealers with less patience and more desperation. Men who didn't understand the old rules or didn't care to. Time's changing, Bub said quietly beside him. These kids don't even know who Stephanie St. Clair was. Some of them barely know who you are. Bumpy smiled faintly. That's how you know you're getting old, he said. When people forget who you had to bury to give them the streets they think they earned. They stood in silence for a moment. Doctor says you should rest more, Bub added. Heart ain't what it used to be. Heart never was what people thought it was, Bumpy replied. They saw toughness. They never saw the breaks. He glanced at his old friend. You ever been to Ferncliff? Bumpy asked. Cemetery? Bub said. Yeah, couple times. Why? We're going tomorrow, Bumpy said. There's a man we haven't visited. The next day, the road out of the city felt longer than usual. Trees replaced tenements. Billboards replaced bodegas. The air changed from exhaust and fried food to something cleaner that Bumpy did not trust. At Ferncliff Cemetery, the grass was too green, the paths too neat, the silence too complete. Death should not be tidy, Bumpy thought. He walked slowly between headstones until he found the one he was looking for. Malcolm X, El Hajj, Malik El Shabazz, 1925, 1965. The stone was simple. The life it marked had been anything but. Bub hung back a respectful distance, lighting a cigarette and pretending not to watch. Bumpy stood in front of the grave, hat in his hand, for a long time without speaking. 3 years, he said finally. You've been gone 3 years. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint sound of traffic from the highway beyond the fence. They say this neighborhood is changing, Bumpy continued. Black mayors, black cops, programs, grants, new words for old problems. He shook his head. They still killing us, he said. They just write better reports now. He looked at the name on the stone. You were right about one thing, Bumpy said. The world is bigger than Lenox Avenue, bigger than Harlem, bigger than all the corners put together. Took me a long time to admit that. A small bird hopped near the base of the stone, pecking at something invisible. I kept my promise, Bumpy said. No war in your name. No ministers shot coming out of mosques. No bombs in cars on 116th. I had men begging me for permission. I told them no. His jaw tightened. Some days, he added, I hate you for making me that kind of man. A breeze stirred the leaves overhead. You know the funny part? Bumpy said. The government never expected that. They had files ready for riots, street wars, black-on-black revenge. They had plans for locking this whole neighborhood down if your death turned Harlem into a battlefield. He smiled, a slow, tired thing. And instead, he said, Harlem just kept going. People went to work, kids went to school. Some cursed your name, some wore it like armor. But there was no war, just a silence they didn't know what to do with. He knelt down slowly, one knee protesting, and placed his hand on the cool stone. I thought power was about fear, he said, about making a man think twice before he crossed you. I thought leverage was about paperwork and secrets. He let his fingers trace the engraved letters. You taught me something I didn't want to learn, he said. Sometimes power is not what you do. It's what you refuse to do. He exhaled. I had a chance, Bumpy said softly, to turn your death into exactly what they were afraid of, to make this city feel you from one river to the other. And I didn't. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because you asked me not to. He stayed there for a moment longer, then pushed himself back to his feet. You got what you wanted, he said, a clean legacy. They argue about your words, not your body count. They study your speeches instead of your rap sheet. He put his hat back on. Me, he added. They'll remember me the way they always have. Half monster, half savior, depending on who's telling the story. He turned to walk back to Bub, then stopped and looked over his shoulder one last time. You once asked me if I could live with myself if you died, and I could have stopped it, Bumpy said. The answer is no, I can't. I just got good at walking around it. He tipped his hat. Rest, kid, he said. The rest of us got to keep negotiating with men who think they own the world. He walked back toward the car. Bub flicked his cigarette away. You done? Bub asked. No, Bumpy said, but I've said all I can say here. They drove back toward the city, the skyline rising up like a challenge. In Harlem, the story of that strange friendship between a gangster and a preacher, a numbers king and a revolutionary, never completely died. Old men in barber shops told younger men that history was not as clean as books made it sound, that sometimes the only thing standing between a leader and a bullet was a promise made in a room no one wrote about. They said that once upon a time, a man who ruled corners with an iron hand tried to protect a man who ruled minds with words. They said he failed. They said he had to live with that failure longer than any prison sentence. And they said that for the rest of his days, whenever someone mentioned Malcolm's name, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson would go very quiet for a moment, like a man listening for an echo only he could hear. The echo of a question. What is power, really? The power to kill? The power to protect? The power to choose not to avenge? Or the power to carry the weight of all three and keep walking? No file answered that. No headline could. No legend ever would. But somewhere between the burnt house in Queens, the stage at the Audubon, and a grave in a quiet cemetery miles from Harlem, the answer lived in two men whose paths crossed for a brief, bright, and terrible moment in history. One paid in blood, the other paid in regret. Both, in their own way, understood that the real dilemma was never just Malcolm's. It belonged to anyone who ever tried to be both dangerous and decent in a world that punished both. I really want to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. This story has reached readers on every continent, and I'm always amazed by how far these legends travel. Drop a comment. Share this story. Let's talk about it. If this story of the bloodiest wedding in Harlem history hit different, drop a like and subscribe. See you in the next one.